InvestorIdeas.com podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcasts. In today's podcast, I'm going to be looking at a few public and private company announcements, looking at the Green Organic Dutchman Holdings Limited, trading on the TSX as TGOD and the OTC as TGODF, looking at ICAN Farms Incorporated as well as Zentrella, and also looking at High Tea Cannabis Co., as well as Aurora Cannabis Incorporated, trading on the New York Stock Exchange and the TSX as ACB, the Valens Company Incorporated, trading on the TSX as VLNS and the OTCQX as VLNCF, as well as Atma Journey Centers Incorporated. So first today, starting with the Green Organic Dutchman Holdings Limited, who announced that it signed a supply agreement with CanMart, a subsidiary of Namaste Technologies Incorporated, making its certified organic medical cannabis products available via CanMart's online medical cannabis sales platform. Working with established players such as CanMart expands our distribution footprint within the medical cannabis market while allowing TGOD to focus medical resources on research and innovation, commented Sean Bovington, TGOD's Chief Financial Officer and Interim Chief Executive Officer. Their reach and scale facilitate access to cannabis treatments for patients across Canada. So under the 2-year term agreement, TGOD will provide CanMart with a broad portfolio of certified organic medical cannabis products, including premium dried flower, Ripple, dissolvable powders, gummies, and teas. So Green Organic Dutchman there, kind of doubling down somewhat on the medical market. They do have some of their products available with the Shoppers Drug Mart medical cannabis program, and now also working with CanMart. Those are kind of the two big main players for the medical cannabis market in Canada. There are a few smaller online dispensary setups similar to CanMart, but not with the same sort of scale and reach, and also not with the same sort of customer access points that CanMart offers, similarly with Shoppers Drug Mart. I do think this is a smart play for any of the companies that are focusing on the medical market to be working with as many of these providers as possible, not simply with Shoppers or with CanMart, but with, again, every avenue that's available so they can get more of their products to medical patients. As, again, I have mentioned many times in the past, that is a wildly underserved part of the cannabis industry in Canada and in the U.S. Actually, in most markets right now, the medical market is still somewhat underserved, especially once there's recreational available. And I do also just somewhat like this because Green Organic Dutchman and Namaste have been two of my kind of underdog companies for quite some time, and now they're working together, which is kind of fun. Next, looking at ICAN Farms Incorporated, who announced that its wholly owned Colombian subsidiary, Potcasts SAS, has successfully completed the first commercial sale and exportation of THC to Mexico for use in Formula Magistral. We are excited to participate in this groundbreaking moment for the cannabis industry and the countries of Mexico and Colombia as the first Colombian company to export psychoactive cannabis oil to Mexico. We would like to thank both governments for their roles ensuring this collaborative effort remained a top priority, said Borja Sanz de Madrid, president of ICAN Farms International. Now, working hand in hand with both governments, the company was successfully able to obtain all certifications and permissions needed to legalize the process and complete its 15-step procedure required to export psychoactive cannabis products from Colombia to Mexico. And ICAN Farm legalized the exportation process of psychoactive cannabis in Colombia, making it the first company to successfully complete a commercial sale for export. We are proud to have participated in this historic moment and look forward to our growth servicing the global cannabis market, said Brian Baca, CEO of ICAN Farms. And ICAN Farms intends to list on the Canadian Securities Exchange later this year, potentially. So pretty big moment there for both Mexico and Colombia, and realistically for sort of the reversal of what we've seen with the war on drugs. Two of the most heavily impacted countries, Colombia and Mexico, when you're looking at all of the legal restrictions and sort of world detriment that's been caused from cannabis laws. It's nice to see now that not only are those two companies and governments working together, but also working together with cannabis products. That's a pretty cool turnaround of how things were from the past to where they are today. And that does speak towards, hopefully, Mexico having some sort of medicinal cannabis program later in the year and potentially having a recreational in the next 2 to 3 years. And I do think that will be the biggest market to sort of pay attention to as far as the global shift towards cannabis. I think that will have some pretty profound changes on the entire industry, as well as, again, on how, in general, people see drugs and specifically cannabis moving into the future. But I'm sure ICAN Farms will have a lot of attention on them when they do list on the Canadian Securities Exchange later this year or into the next. Next, looking at Canadian neurotech startup Zentrella, who announced the completion of an 850,000 seed round led by Homic Ventures. The investment will be used to further commercialize Zentrella's proprietary EEG test for the cannabis impairment and create the world's largest scientific database of cannabis product effects. In 2019, the company raised $1.2 million in funding from the Ontario Brain Institute and various government agencies to fund prototype development and clinical trials. The neuroscience of cannabis is advancing quickly at pace with the speed of deregulation as government regulators, licensed producers, drug testing experts, law enforcement officials, and recreational cannabis users seek to better understand cannabis and its effects on the brain. Our research has already identified several proprietary signatures related to how cannabis impacts the brain, and we are now cataloging the entire universe of effects for Cannabis 2.0 products. This goldmine of data will help unlock new insights and opportunities for licensed producers and enable cannabis consumers to make a more informed purchase decision to ensure responsible and enjoyable cannabis use, said Israel Gasparin, Zentrella's CEO and founder. We expect innovative Cannabis 2.0 products will trigger the next wave of growth in the cannabis sector, especially as U.S. markets continue to deregulate and the prospect of national U.S. legalization becomes more real, said Richard Sampson, president of Homic Ventures. Now, Zentrella's unique and scalable neuroscience-based methodology solves a major challenge for the industry and promises to provide a rapid growing universe of cannabis users with the information they demand and need for safe and enjoyable cannabis use. Zentrella's approach combines proprietary artificial intelligence algorithms with deep neuroscience expertise to decode electrical brain activity and convert it into reliable and meaningful information. The potential for neuroscience has exploded as artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms have matured, and we can now isolate neural signatures and product effects and use that information rapidly to accelerate the process of mapping specific cannabis product effects for consumers, said Gasparin. So, that's definitely something that there's a few companies working on in different parts of the world right now, is really mapping the neuroscience behind how each cannabinoid interacts with our body and with our brain. Obviously, there's a lot of valuable data and information there that, if ever accessed, will be pretty high value property in the world of cannabis and just in the world in general. And I do think that that's very interesting and worth paying attention to, is how these companies evolve and what sort of data they do collect. As again, more and more we learn about the endocannabinoid system and about microcannabinoids, about terpenes, and about just the various minutiae of the cannabis plant, it does become quite imperative that you see more of these companies actually focusing on the neuroscience behind this. That's the only way you're going to get more backing from the medical and scientific community and more support. And you do need a lot of those people to help innovate and also help really narrow down what are the specific cannabinoids that do cause specific effects in the body and in the brain, especially when you're looking at the medical market. If you want to be able to properly diagnose people more effectively so they can have cures for whatever diseases and ailments cannabis is meant to be treating for them, we want to be making sure that whatever products are going out there have the most effective results, and that does require a very advanced knowledge of both the cannabis plant, the effects that every single molecule that plant produces can trigger within our mind and within our body, and sort of how to also control that from a breeding perspective. That's the biggest thing that is the issue today and remains to be one. And when you're looking at the cannabis industry, is that these plants are extremely versatile when it comes to their growth, and they can produce a lot of these different variations of these microcannabinoids. And until we know more about which cannabinoids produce which effects consistently, you won't know which plants to sort of push in which direction to get more desirable results when you're looking for the medical applications. Next, looking at High Tea Cannabis Co., who announced the opening of its flagship cannabis store in Brampton, Ontario, and its commitment to achieving zero-emission delivery by utilizing its fleet of Tesla vehicles. High Tea will open its doors to the public officially on February 12th today, with some clear market differentiators at play that will appeal to its customers. Prior to the pandemic, visions for High Tea included a space that moved beyond just cannabis retail, but included social, experiential interactions and integrative wellness offerings that would distinguish our brand from other retailers in the States, said Paul Zhu, CEO of High Tea Cannabis Corporation. Now, however, amid the pandemic, we've put these social integrations aside for the moment and will instead focus on grounding the customer experience through premium cannabis offerings, reliable delivery, and curbside pickup. Now, while the social and interactive components may not be available at the outset, High Tea will be setting itself apart through unique delivery vehicles, where more than half of the fleet will be operating via Tesla cars. Growth in e-commerce has meant that there are more delivery vehicles on the road than ever before. We want to do our part to reduce our carbon footprint. High Tea is committed to sustainability, and our goal is to expand our availability of Tesla vehicles and achieve zero emissions delivery for all orders in the future, said Zhu. So we see great potential for High Tea to thrive in Brampton while simultaneously offering tremendous value to the community that lives there. We had very clear characteristics that we were looking for when selecting the location for our flagship store, and Brampton hit each element, including a thriving population, space for opportunity, and diversity. Now, as is the first location of the High Tea brand, the company is poised to open an additional 15 stores in 2021 in Ontario. Interesting sort of way to launch there, focusing on the emissions for the delivery. I do think that delivery is going to continue to play a bigger and bigger role in cannabis. All you have to do is look at the food industry and make the comparisons. It's pretty obvious that Skip the Dishes and DoorDash and apps like that have become not only essential to the restaurant industry, but the most driving force behind it over the last year, and will probably continue to be a more and more impactful source of revenue for restaurants. I think restaurants will start looking at their own internal delivery platforms or trying to find better margins with Skip the Dishes, DoorDash-like programs and applications. And I think the same thing is going to eventually apply to cannabis. You only have to look at sort of the eventuality there once you're allowed more access, and also once regulations allow for more delivery. For instance, again in BC, there is no delivery options available yet, but once that becomes more regular in Ontario, it is, and now you're seeing companies are obviously prepared for that right out of the gate, focusing on having Teslas. Not only is it a nice sort of, yes, we're focusing on carbon footprinting, but also flashy, a nice form of advertising that you can sort of do out and about. I think that that's a smart play, and I think that that's going to be a play for a lot of cannabis companies. Should they create their own delivery systems, is that they should realize that's one of the few marketing opportunities they can have, where they can have a form of branding on their cars that is allowed to be out in public, as opposed to, again, the highly restrictive version of marketing that cannabis companies have to deal with right now. So it offers sort of a double win for these companies. Not only do they gain more access to more customers, but they also can then advertise to the surrounding area of where they are and what they're doing, and also where their website is, etc. So I do think that having sort of a flashy delivery vehicle, very smart play on their part, also very aggressive plans for the next year with 15 stores. That being said, I guess 15 isn't that crazy for all of Ontario, but they are in a pretty competitive space so far. So I would expect, again, most companies to be launching or to be expanding will have similar type of narratives moving forward, whether in the US or Canada, as they're going to be focusing on having some sort of delivery platforms, curbside pickup, etc. And that will become a more prominent part of the industry as, again, COVID lockdowns and restrictions continue to be a thing until that completely dissipates. And nobody knows for right now if that is even going to be an eventuality within the next year or so. So I do think that that's the smart way for any of these companies to go. Next, looking at Aurora Cannabis, who announced its financial and operational results for the second quarter of fiscal 2021. Some of their financial highlights included total cannabis net revenue of $70.3 million, which was up 11% over the second quarter of 2020. Medical cannabis net revenue of $38.9 million, up 42% versus the second quarter of 2020, as well as loss triggered by several decisions expected to boost long-term profitability. You can look at the rest of the financial results at the link attached in the article, or visit their website, or go to cedar.com. Aurora has an excellent second quarter, and I'm pleased that we're advancing nicely against the plan we laid out in September of 2020, stated Miguel Martin, Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Cannabis. For the period, our core revenue strength in medical and consumer was complemented by initial rollouts in vape products and concentrates, and combined, these elements are part of the proven regulated CPG strategy we've adopted. Adjusted EBITDA for the quarter, while vastly improved year over year, was impacted by several decisions that we believe would clear a path for our premium products focus and more valuable cost model. We are confident that this will give Aurora maximum flexibility in the position to organize to drive significant cash flow in the coming quarters. So Nothing really that surprising with Aurora Cannabis. Their stock has been trading down for the last sort of 3 days, continues to do so today. It's not too much of a surprise that there is a little bit of a loss, but it is interesting to note, and something you're seeing across the board right now is that, again, even last year with a lot of record-setting sales, most companies are still above last year's sales, and at least up by about 10 to 20% in lots of different areas. And you're continuing to see that across all of these financial reports or revenue reports or sales reports. Next, looking at the Valens company, who has received an amendment to its existing Health Canada standard processing license, permitting the sale of dried cannabis products to authorized provincial and territorial retailers in Canada. Now, this license amendment allows the Valens company to distribute next-generation dried cannabis derivative products across the country, including the company's total addressable market. So, pre-rolls and dried cannabis derivative products will be the latest addition to the company's growing portfolio of in-demand offering, which includes a variety of cannabis extract products such as vape, concentrates, edibles, beverages, and topicals. At the request of our partners, we are increasing our product offering to include pre-rolls and next-generation dried cannabis products, said Tyler Robson, Chief Executive Officer, Co-founder, and Chair of Valens Company. We believe that this license, paired with our low-cost platform, will drive a competitive advantage for our partners in a category with price-sensitive consumers. Now, with access to competitively priced fresh and dried cannabis sources, Valens is strongly positioned to develop and manufacture the highest quality dried cannabis derivative products at a category-shaping value proposition. A variety of pre-roll formats and numerous blends and sizes are currently under development at Valens' newly operational K2 facility located in Kelowna, BC. So Valens now going to be jumping into the pre-roll segment as well as other dry cannabis derivatives. So really they're just gaining more and more of that larger market share of the white label sort of community. They continue to do a pretty stellar job. And obviously now that they've expanded their portfolio, I expect to hear a lot more product offerings from them over the next 6 months to a year. Lastly today, looking at Atma Journey Centers Incorporated, who is an Alberta-based company focused on delivering innovative psychedelic-assisted therapies international, who announced the launch of an innovative professional training program in conjunction with Wayfound Mental Health Group Incorporated that will equip mental health professionals with the knowledge and insight to work with psychedelic medicines as they become accessible and legalized in Canada. Starting in March of this year, Atma and Wayfound will present the Psychedelic Therapy Training Program for mental health professionals, which will take place through remote training as well as on-site at Atma's Calgary Journey Center. And the training allows participants to apply for an exemption from Health Canada to experience legal psychedelic-assisted therapy using psilocybin, one of the active compounds found in magic mushrooms. An incorporated hands-on experience with psychedelics for therapists in a legal setting is the first for the mental health community in Canada. David Harder, co-CEO of Atma, said, "While Health Canada continues to increase access to legal psychedelic-assisted therapy for patients through their recent Section 56 exemption, there is a growing need in the mental health industry for therapists to have the appropriate training and knowledge to facilitate this important work. Each participant of the professional training program will also be assisted in obtaining their own exemption from Health Canada so that they may personally undergo psychedelic-assisted therapy. And this unique element of the training will provide each professional the personal perspective to truly understand and experience how psychedelics can benefit their patients." Health Canada has recently been taking steps to increase access to psychedelic medicine through its ongoing approvals of exemptions under Section 56. So far, mainly towards veterans as well as PTSD. And Health Canada has also recently completed a public consultation period regarding the Special Access Program with a view to reversing certain regulatory changes made in 2013 that prohibited access to restricted drugs such as psychedelics through the SAP. We believe that Health Canada has recognized the need to consider increased access to psychedelic medicine for Canadians, and that a key element of this will be ensuring that there are professionals prepared and trained to support patients who undergo this innovative treatment. So I gotta say, that's a pretty awesome thing for a lot of those healthcare professionals to be able to have access to now. Definitely was a necessity if you're going to be continuing to expand upon psychedelic assisted therapy. You're going to need to have professionals who are trained properly in actually having a first-hand experience with psychedelics. That's something I've mentioned and discussed a couple of times on the podcast, and also in some of our interviews with some of the companies focused on psychedelics, is that I do think that that will be a necessary step. If you're going to be giving someone psychedelic assisted therapy and you have no personal experience in psychedelics, I don't believe you should be doing that psychedelic assisted therapy. You should not be leading it, because again, these to not understand what that person is going through on a personal level is missing half the point. And realistically, there's no way or guarantee that these people will be able to properly guide people through these experiences and give them the proper outcomes they're looking for if, again, they have not had firsthand experience. So that will be very interesting to pay attention to. I'm definitely going to be watching how ATMA rolls out this program over the next year, what some of the data or at least even anecdotal experiences are like, and sort of how maybe some of those medical professionals or mental health professionals change some of their perspective on both psychedelics and mental health after the experience. I think that will be one of the most interesting sort of experiments we could have, is treating traditional mental health professionals with psychedelic assisted therapy and seeing how their perspective on both traditional mental health and psychedelic assisted therapies change after having that personal experience. I think that data set will be quite profound and will be probably a big game changer for how the entire medical community continues to view both cannabis and psychedelic drugs moving forward. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.